This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, good morning again, everybody, and thank you for being here. And usually I get pumped up about these morning sessions, but for whatever reason, I've woken up today in a kind of a somber mood. So I hope you'll forgive me for not quite being able to match my calamity with serenity. That the last one that Gus read, it's for me it's the most amazing of the promises in the book, because it not only tells me what to do, but it promises that if I will do that, I'll feel okay in spite of whatever's going on in the human realm. That just to the extent that I humbly rely on my higher power and I behave the way I think my higher power wants me to behave, I am promised that I will be able to meet the calamity, the human calamity, with spiritual serenity. And lots of times I can. I'm just struggling this morning with something, and so we'll see. But I do. I've experienced enough of it. I know it's true, and I know when I'm not experiencing serenity, there's something I'm not doing. I'm either not humbly relying or I'm not behaving the way God wants me to behave. So okay, this morning we're dealing with chapter 2. There is a solution. We've been through the doctor's opinion. We've been through Bill's story, and any of you that have heard Joe and Charlie talk about the big book, they talk about step 1 being the problem. So we're trying to define and understand the problem as best we can. Step 2 is about the solution, which is a spiritual solution. And step 3 is the decision to treat the disease. And it's why we spent so much time early on, before we even got to doctor's opinion, talking about the 3 different aspects of our disease, the disease of alcoholism. There's a physical aspect, there's a mental aspect, there's a spiritual aspect. And the way this is being presented, we go through and we name each one of those. Silkworth called it an allergy, the physical part. Fred, in more about alcoholism, calls it a strange mental blank spot. That's the mental part where I can't see that it's the first drink that's going to get me drunk. I can't stay away from the first drink. And the spiritual one, which is the hardest for most everybody, because it's just harder to define. And but one of the things in this presentation is that the symptom, the symptom by which you know you have the spiritual malady, is fear. If I'm experiencing fear about what's happening in my life, it's because I have no resource to humbly rely on. I can't turn to whatever it is, and you know, we're gonna read today that we're non-denominational. We're not any more Christian than we are Buddhist. You know, sometimes people object to saying the Lord's Prayer at the end of meetings, and yeah, you can say it's Christian, but you hear a lot of non-Christian stuff in meetings, and we don't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's Buddha, Mohammed, Jesus, or Confucius. It doesn't matter. Those are human beings, human powers, and we're trying to get in touch with a whole level of consciousness and being that's far beyond and far deeper, both, than our human nature, our bodies and our minds. But fear tells me that I am stuck in my human power and I lack human power. You know, that's the big thing when we get to we agnostics. It says you can wish to be moral, you can wish to be serene, you can wish to have a great life, you can wish to have good friends, you can wish to have a good relationship with anybody, and you can't pull it off because you're trying to do it on human power, and we lack power. This is the hardest thing. I really didn't I got powerless over alcohol right away. As soon as I heard about the allergy, and as soon as I could recognize that, yeah, I was always going to stop at 3, and it never happened. And I could not understand it, and condemned myself for being a weak-willed wussy. And you just can't. I hated waking up hungover. It was bad enough when I woke up. I always woke up with a sense of deep dread of, who's going to disappoint me today? Who's going to let me down today, or what's going to take me down today? And so I got the alcohol part. What I did not get until, let's see, I got to do 4 years ago, was my powerlessness over me. This is, and when you get this one, it's freaky. When I realize that I'm going to experience fear or resentment or remorse, whether or not I want to, because nobody wants to. When you go into a depression, at least I haven't met anybody yet that says, yippee, I'm going in. The only thing I ever recognized as a benefit of being in my depression is I didn't have to do anything. I could just lay in bed all day. And I do believe that the moment I saw that, I started climbing out. I started that was my ego, that my ego liked the depression because it didn't have to do anything. It didn't have to talk to anybody. It didn't have to take any action, whatever. I'm getting a little bit off here, but things have changed for me in terms of my relationship to higher power, my relationship to AA. When I saw that powerlessness over me, and I really, it's made a big difference. At any rate, so when we're talking about there is a solution, it doesn't say to what. I mean, there's a solution to whatever I think my problem is. There's a solution in here, and that solution is humbly relying on God and behaving the way I think God wants me to behave. It's always the solution. It's always no matter what the problem. The answer is humbly rely on God and behave the way you think God wants you to behave, or whatever word you need to put in there. So anyway, I'm going to run through this chapter and hit some high points, and hope to stop like 20 after, and we'll have open discussion. And then we're going to take a couple weeks off. We won't be meeting again till the second Sunday in January. Chapter 2, there is a solution. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Remember, this is following Bill's story, so we've gotten a good dose of Bill's hopelessness. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved their drink problem. I'm going to start skim reading here. We are average Americans. We are people who normally would not mix. That's one of the things that we love about the fellowship. You can look around the room and you realize the cast of characters that you're seeing, these are not people I would normally be hanging out with. And for me anyway, that's something I love as much as anything, that we come from all walks of life. And it's going to say it. Well, somewhere. Where people normally would not mix, but there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, an understanding, which is indescribably wonderful. I hope you feel that. I know I do, and I think you go on the traditions. At tradition 1 saying personal recovery depends upon AA unity. So when I walk into an AA meeting, my job is not judging other people or judging their programs or getting ticked off at somebody because they say something I don't think is appropriate or whatever, or because they show up late. I have a thing about people showing up late, making a grand entrance, making noise, blah, blah, blah. And then this analogy to the shipwreck where they're talking about, all walks of life on these big liners. The higher up you were, the farther away from the basement of the ship, the higher class you were, but everybody's together. But then this important point, that we suffer from a common peril and we enjoy the benefits of a common solution. It's both of those things, the disaster as well as the solution to the disaster. The tremendous fact, I'm at the bottom of page 17, for every one of us, we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out. You probably have heard that they were going to call the book The Way Out. Before they discovered there were already a dozen books with that name. We have a way out on which we absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news that this book carries. Okay, so I've turned to page 18. We'll talk about an illness, the disease concept, all of that stuff. I was talking earlier about the three aspects of the disease, the symptom by which we know we have that aspect, the treatment plan for the aspect. That's important to understand because then you can identify when you slip, whether it's a mental slip or a physical slip. You can oftentimes go back, well, what are you doing in terms of treating this part of it? And the way the steps are being presented here, the only treatment for the physical allergy is not taking the first drink, total abstinence. The treatment for the mental part is to really go through this rigorous mental examination of the way we think, looking at the big negatives, the resentment, the fear, and the sense of remorse around our selfish conduct that affect us unconsciously, if not consciously. And finally, the treatment plan for the spiritual malady begins with prayer, which is the last thing that Silkworth says. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, not cursily, read this book through. And though perhaps you came to practice contempt prior to investigation, the way you've been doing most of your life, you will remain to pray. Prayer is the opposite of contempt prior to investigation. It requires that I be honest and open and willing. And so the solution to the spiritual malady is 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis. But the fact is, most of us can't do that. Prayer doesn't mean much to us yet, and our minds are so filled with stuff, so filled with resentment and fear and remorse that it's not possible for, we can ask, but how often we talk about pause, ask and listen, and then do. The pause is step 10. The pause is quit playing God. 11 is the asking and the listening. And 12 is the action that we carry out based on what we hear. Quit playing God, invite God in as your director, as your principal, as your parent, and then do. Do as directed. So I'm still at the top of page 18, this disease concept of a person has cancer, we're all sorry for them, but with alcohol, with it, there goes annihilation of all the things worthwhile in life. These are hard words to read sometimes. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, and wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. We hope this volume will inform and comfort. There is a solution. We're supposed to get comfort out of that. Problem is when we get to that line, it says, there is a solution. And the very next line is, we don't like it. None of us like it. This is hard work. It takes devotion. It takes energy. It takes guidance from the group. So anyway, then they run through a couple of things with the psychiatrist and how most people find us unapproachable. They can't get through. And the important converse of that is the idea that one alcoholic can get through to another, and why it's so important of us to be making that attempt to be helpful to another alcoholic, not necessarily as a sponsor. You know, this book doesn't really address sponsorship as we know it today. It just means trying to be helpful to another drunk, trying to get in on their level or with their language. Then they say it's italics. The ex-problem drinker who has found the solution, properly armed with facts about himself. What does that mean? The facts about myself that I understand is that I have an allergy to alcohol. I can't afford to take the first drink, but I've got a mind that needs the relief that I got from alcohol so bad, it keeps encouraging me to take the first drink. And I'm stuck in my self-reliance, which our book says, why do we fear? Because of the failure of self-reliance. That's why I fear, because I try to solve my problem with my mind, and my mind can't do it. It lacks the power to do it. It's operating on a human level. It's a human power. And when you get to B, it's going to say no human power is going to relieve our alcoholism. We have to go for spiritual power. We lack spiritual power. Properly armed with facts about himself can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Of course, this is coming directly out of Bill and Bob's meeting. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That's a promise. You could say that's a first step promise. That the man who's making the approach has had the same difficulty, knows what he's talking about. His whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he's a man with a real answer. And there, some of our readings come from this. No attitude of holier than thou. They're telling you how you are to be if you try to approach another alcoholic. No attitude of holier than thou. Nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful. This is saying no 13th stepping, kids. The only reason you're doing this is the sincere desire to be helpful, not to get anything back. That there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. That's why we call this a short lecture to be endured, because it is a lecture, and I hope you can endure it. These are the conditions that we have found most effective. So this idea of establishing the conditions, this is an Oxford group thing. It's all over the book, How to Listen to God. And it's what we're doing as we go through steps 4 through 9. We're trying to establish in our own minds the conditions necessary so that we can have a relationship with this power greater than ourselves, or with our spiritual selves. You know, you read the spiritual appendix, it talks about an unsuspected inner resource. Doesn't say outer resource. It's talking about my spiritual nature within me, my soul. That's what I'm trying to make contact with. The trouble is, it's like having two people in a room and one of them screaming 24/7 all the time about whatever its human problems are, and the other's just sitting there. And if I'm privy to that conversation, you know, I'm sitting here, God, what should I do in regard to this situation, this family situation I got going on over here? You know, what am I going to hear? I'm going to hear Jack complaining about Jack and the world, talking to Jack, telling Jack what to do so it can be happy. How am I ever going to hear my spiritual nature? How am I ever going to hear what do we say it? Patience, tolerance, kindness, love. I am not going to get that from here. That's why it says in that quote, it's on page 83, long before the 9th step promises. So we ask our Creator each morning in meditation. So it's saying, I'm in meditation, and I'm asking to be shown. I'm not asking God to help me figure it out. I'm asking to be shown the way of patience and tolerance and kindness and love. And if you think about the opposite of those things, it's going to be exactly the nature of every character defect: impatient, intolerant, which means judgmental, resentful, unkind, which means selfish, which means, me first, which means making everything about me, and frightened instead of loving. Patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. I mean, it's just the opposite of what my human personality is. And I'm not going to get to patience, tolerance, kindness, and love unless I can establish an honest mind, aware that it has failed, that its self-reliance has failed, that I'm not getting what my mind has promised me I'm going to get out of life. Whatever I was talking about, it just went away. I'm having one of those senior moments. Anyway, patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. So, okay, I'm back to, I'm on page 19 at the top of it. They talk about none of us make a sole vocation. We're not professionals. We're keeping money, prestige, and property out of this deal. But make sure you see this line. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. And then what's it say? A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our homes, our occupations, and our affairs. Doesn't include AA meetings. It's not, that's where we go for our training. That's our little school session, if you want. But a more important demonstration is in the details of our daily lives. If we keep going the way we're going, there's little doubt that much good will result, but the surface will hardly be scratched. That's as true today as it was when they wrote the book. How many people are out there with no idea that if they take the first drink, troubles come in one form or another? How many people out there have no idea? I certainly, in all my thinking I'm a smart guy and I know what I'm doing, I never heard it till I came in here. And then it took a while to hear it in here. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? We've concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge, suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with the drinking problem. Okay, and then they talk about, we're going to have to talk about all of this stuff. At the bottom of 19, most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. And then it says, as it so often does, our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. This is not so much about you finding the right sponsor as about you finding how you can be helpful to another drunk. I mean, obviously, good sponsorship makes a huge difference. And Clancy's even said, you can reduce every problem inside AA down to lack of effective one-on-one sponsorship. The one thing that's not really, I mean, we get lots of hints, obviously, but it's not like there's sponsor school that you can go to. Then they start talking about, what do I have to do? It's the end of that next paragraph. It's the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We are going to tell you precisely what we have done. Go into detail. We're going to summarize what they've done so far. Then there's this opening stuff about the way people approach us. They don't understand what's your problem. They have all these solutions, but he could stop if he wanted to. And at the end of that paragraph, back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different than ours. You know, we don't understand them. They don't understand us. Closest you can get is, well, how do you do it? Can you eat a single piece of chocolate? Can you eat a single potato chip? You know, they do not, they can take it or leave it. It doesn't have the effect on them that it does on, it doesn't bring them, I guess, the same kind of relief that we get that makes drinking so appealing, so attractive. Well, moderate drinkers have little trouble. They can take it or leave it alone. So then comes a pretty important point here. They're going to start talking about the hard drinker. And again, this is whatever works for you, works for you. I'll tell you what works for me. I think the hard drinker has the allergy. If he starts, he's going to get drunk and he's going to get in trouble. But if he's able to see that as the first story in more about alcoholism, if he's able to see it, and you give him enough of a reason, you give him a health reason, a relationship reason, a work reason, you give him some reason, he can stop. My brother, I'm here because my brother intervened in my life. He's a hard drinker. He saw what was happening in our family and he just decided, I'm not taking the first drink. I don't think he understood the allergy. He just knew if he took the first drink, he was going to wind up dead drunk and doing something he didn't want to do. So as he's intervening and taking me off to our local hospital, you know, he puts his arm around my shoulder and he says, it's easy, just don't drink. Now, I don't know about you, but my mind, you don't understand. You don't get it. I can't just don't drink, but the hard drinker can, you know. And then the next thing it's going to say, what about the real alcoholic, old Joe and Charlie? My name's Joe and I'm a real alcoholic. You know, he's just saying, and then I also liked it because he was kind of saying, you know, I'm real now. I'm real today. I'm not putting anything on. You know, I like that idea that I'm for real today. I'm like the Velveteen Rabbit or whatever it is. Okay, then we run through a bunch of stuff, but I want to point out in the middle of, on page 21, middle paragraph starts with, here's the fellow. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. If you're working with a new person, this is a great line to come to because they will be, you know, ask them, when was the last time you were mildly intoxicated? You know, chances are they're not a real alcoholic the way we are. We are, because of the allergy, because of this abnormal reaction, because our bodies demand more. It's not a mental thing. Our bodies demand more. Where a normal drinker, their body says, stop. You're hurting me. I don't want more. It's not making things better. But we are rarely mildly intoxicated. It's just a wonderful thing if you're trying to get this understanding. And then later on in that same paragraph, it's going to tell you, it's going to start talking. He's often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything else. That was me. I've always had a good quality, a good physical quality of life. And I absolutely never saw evidence of the allergy. That's why the strange mental blank spot has been the term that I use for the mental part of this thing. Okay, I'm over onto page 22. In the middle of the page, why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experience have shown him that one drink means another debacle, with all the suffering and humiliation, why does he take the one drink? You know, why you hear people say, how do they say it? I didn't have a problem drinking. I had a problem when I was sober. You know, it's the other side of it. I cannot not drink. And they're getting closer to this strange mental blank spot. In the next paragraph of the last sentence, we cannot answer the riddle It can't tell us. It's even going to say, doesn't it say, oh, yeah, on page 23, I'm going to go back up to the top, but once in a while he may tell the truth. And the truth is, strange to say, that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Isn't that amazing? We don't know. I mean, I know it instantly solved whatever problem I thought I had, instantly. Made the sunshine come out, made me feel good inside. But look at the top, because these observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind, not his body. Our problem is not the allergy. Our problem is in our minds. And that's why our thinking is what we got to work with. And that's what we do in steps 4 through 9. We're working with our thinking. Okay, over to page 24, and I'm sure you've heard when they put things in italics, pay attention. So this is a great definition of the strange mental blank spot, and they're going to tell us the symptom by which you know you have it. You know you've got an allergy, an abnormal reaction to alcohol, if you've experienced the phenomenon of craving, which means you can't just drink one. So now they're going to explain, you have this strange mental blank spot if, and they're going to tell you what the if is. Okay, fact is, for most alcoholics, for reasons that we don't really understand, we've lost the power of choice. Our so-called willpower becomes non-existent. We are unable at certain times. I'm looking at the drink. I'm unable at certain times to remember what happened the last time I took this first drink. They talk about even a week or a month ago without the way it went for me is I would wake up feeling so physically wretched. I had no interest in drinking. And I would even say to myself, well, this is good. It's 8 o'clock and you haven't started in the morning and you haven't started yet. This is good. And then about 4 o'clock, I'd hear that little voice. Hey, Jackie boy, headache's kind of subsided. I'm not feeling sick in the tummy. A little something would help us feel better. Maybe we can get to work. Maybe we can do something. And I'd be off and running again, and then determined, I'm going to stop at 3. I'm going to stop at 3. And it would never happen. How we know is in the next paragraph. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. The phenomenon of craving tells me I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. The failure of the hot stove defense tells me I've got a strange mental blank spot. We call it alcoholic insanity, which, by the way, is not the insane things we do when we're drinking. Alcoholic insanity is ever taking the first drink a second time. That's what's insane. And we do that sober. Well, or somewhat sober. And then later on, for how did I ever get started? Well, I'll stop with the 6th drink. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, what's the use? The efforts. Okay, page 25. There is a solution. None of us like it. And then this beautiful paragraph in the middle. Now, this is a waypoint. This is what we want. And I'm going to read it personally. The great fact for me is just this and nothing less, that I have had a deep and effective spiritual experience which has absolutely revolutionized my whole attitude toward my life, toward my fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of my life today is the absolute certainty. I don't have any doubt about this, that my Creator has entered into my heart and life in a way which is indeed miraculous, which means I can't explain it, and I can't take credit for it. I do not know how this happened, other than I watched another guy pray every morning after the meeting, God, please keep me away from a drink today. And I tried it and it worked. All of a sudden I discovered that Silkworth wasn't whistling Dixie, that I'm to understand what's happened in my life and I'm to learn how to pray. And then this thing that we read every week, that most of us don't take to heart, or we're not able to take it to heart and help us be more resolved. If you fit the definition of an alcoholic, you get two choices. There is no middle ground. Either you keep on doing what you're doing, going on to the bitter end, or you accept spiritual help. And the whole rest of the book is how to accept spiritual help into your life. What do you need? What do I need to do to be able to accept help into my life? All right, then we get the story on pages 26 and 27. This is the story of Rowland Hazard. And if this story hadn't taken place, we're not even having this conversation today. Bill and Bob are our founders, co-founders, but they're a bunch of pre-founders. They're a bunch of people that had to do something in order for us to be here today looking at this book. And Rowland Hazard is one of them, and Carl Jung is one of them. And later on, there was some correspondence that took place between Dr. Jung and Bill Wilson later in both of their lives, and we'll get to that. It's later on in the study guide. But this is a critical event, and Bill is a storyteller. It's one of his great gifts. So you can find literature around. It'll say he didn't spend as much time with Carl Jung as the book indicates, that it happened earlier than most people think it happened. Doesn't matter. What matters is what happened here. Basically, this guy goes to Jung to help him get sober. He at the bottom of the paragraph, this paragraph starts with a certain American businessman, and in the middle of the paragraph, that his physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time, goes back to Jung and says, "What's up, doc? I don't get this." Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He would never regain his position in society again, place himself under lock and key, blah, blah, blah. But this man still lives and is a free man. This man ultimately gets Ebby sober through the Oxford groups in New York City. And then because the Oxford group, part of their way was you go help another. Ebby goes to Bill. So if Rowland hadn't done this, we're not even having this conversation. Top of 27. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. They tell you the rest of the story. And they're telling you why your only alternative to going on to the bitter end is to accept spiritual help. The doctor said, this is, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover. One single case in all this guy's experience, where the state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. And then Hazard asks about exceptions, and then Jung brings up this need for a spiritual experience. He says these are occurrences or phenomena. He doesn't understand it, But he did understand it. He said that because of his standing in the medical community. And later on, when we read this correspondence, he explains why he had to say that. And he says, I've been trying to do this with you. Of course, if I was Rowland Hazard, I'd be asking, WTF, Doc, why didn't you tell me this at the beginning before I spent a year and all my money talking to you? Geez, you would have saved me a lot of agony if you just told me at the beginning. So at any rate, this is the part that I think is remarkable is, we're talking about the three aspects of the disease, the physical, the mental, the spiritual. So silkworth represents the physical part, right? Jung doesn't know about silkworth. Jung is just saying your problem is your mind. He has no idea that his problem is a combination of the body and the mind, the allergy and the obsession. And Jung also does not know about the Oxford groups. He doesn't know that there are these groups that are trying to bring people into relationship with God through their little meetings. And they weren't concerned with alcohol. They were concerned with anything that was keeping you from God. And it was started by this man who saw that resentment was preventing him from having a relationship with God. So he wrote a letter of amends to the people he was resenting, and then started this thing up later on. That's why we do resentment first, because that's what the Oxford groups did. We do fear in the middle, because that fear is I'll get off on that. Okay, so silkworth represents the physical part, Jung represents the mental part, and the Oxford groups represent the spiritual part. And that's why we do what we do today. So we're running out of time, and I so I'm on page 28, and just want to point out three things. So one is I love this statement, and I can read it today and I don't get weepy. I used to get weepy. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, can you imagine the agony these people went through trying to form this fellowship and come up with our traditions and keep the meetings from exploding and keep people from hurting each other and all the stuff that they went through in the beginning? If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, wherever we come from, whatever we've done, are the children of a living and loving Creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest and open enough to try prayer, to try having a relationship with a power greater than our body and greater than our minds. And then they go on, no concern of us what religious bodies, but that's entirely a personal affair. And then just one last thing, page 29. I'm a technical kind of guy, and I've thought my way through my life, and I tried to think my way through these steps, and I wanted technical tips on how to do the steps, how to find a sponsor, how to work with a sponsor, whatever. And when we got to the stories, I was like, oh God, we got to read a story again, And the stories are 2/3 of the frickin' book, 2/3 in terms of pages. And they tell us on page 29 why we have all these stories. Each individual in the personal stories describes in their own language and from their own point of view the way they establish their relationship with God. That's what's important here. That's what we do. If you get a chance to speak at a Friday night open speaker meeting, that's your job. Not only what you were like, what happened, and what you are like now, but how you establish your relationship with God. That's what people need and want to hear. So I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas. I'm going to bring this gong and then I'm going to stop the recording and we'll have some open discussion. Thank you very much.